Close your eyes. Forget cities. Forget civilization. Forget everything you've ever known. You're standing on a cold African plain nearly 300,000 years ago. The sun disappeared hours ago. Darkness isn't peaceful. It's alive. Every sound could be a predator. Every shadow could be your last. Then someone throws another branch into the fire. The flames rise. The smoke twists into the night sky. You breathe it in. Not because you wanted to, because there was nowhere else for it to go. You cough, your eyes burn, but something else happens. Your heart slows, your thoughts feel different. No one around you understands why. Neither do you. But your brain remembers that feeling. That single breath may have started one of the oldest relationships in human history. Not with tobacco, not with cigarettes, with smoke itself. Because long before humans built temples, long before kings ruled kingdoms, before the wheel, before farming, smoke was already changing the human mind. And the strangest part, it probably happened by accident. For over a million years, fire was humanity's greatest invention. It cooked food, it scared away predators, it gave light to creatures who had always feared the dark. But fire also created something invisible. Every burning branch released thousands of chemical compounds into the air. Different trees, different grasses, different herbs. Each one produced a different cloud. Most did nothing. Some irritated the lungs. Others released aromatic oils. And a few changed the chemistry inside the brain itself. Imagine discovering that without language, without science, without even understanding what a brain was. You only knew one thing. Whenever that plant burned, people acted differently. At first, nobody was trying to get high. They were simply trying to stay warm. But evolution has always rewarded curiosity. Someone noticed one type of wood smelled sweeter. Another produced vivid dreams. Another made people calm. Another made them laugh. No one understood molecules. No one knew about receptors. But humans have always recognized patterns. Pattern recognition built civilization. It also may have built humanity's first relationship with psychoactive plants. Think about how many nights our ancestors spent around fires. Not dozens, not hundreds, hundreds of thousands. Generation after generation, watching flames dance, listening to crackling wood, breathing the same smoke together. That wasn't just survival. It was the first theater, the first classroom, the first church, the first family dinner. Everything important happened around fire. Stories, warnings, births, deaths, and perhaps humanity's first altered states of consciousness. Modern neuroscience tells us something fascinating. The human brain isn't designed to remain in exactly the same state forever. Sleep changes it. Dreams change it. Music changes it. Meditation changes it. Stress changes it. So does smoke. That desire to experience something beyond ordinary awareness may be older than civilization itself. Not because humans were escaping reality, but because exploring different mental states helped them understand reality. Or at least, that's what they believed. Imagine seeing someone breathe smoke, close their eyes, then describe impossible visions. Dead relatives, animals speaking, strange lights in the sky. Would you call them sick or chosen? Thousands of years ago, the answer was obvious. They weren't ill. They had touched another world. Whether those worlds existed or only existed inside the brain didn't matter. The experience felt real, and experiences shaped civilizations. Long before written history, smoke became something more than smoke. It became mystery, power, medicine, fear, hope, a bridge between ordinary light and everything humans couldn't explain. But if smoke was so important, why don't we find ancient cigarettes buried everywhere? The answer is buried in a problem every archaeologist knows too well. History disappears. Wood rots, leaves decay, fibers dissolve. The oldest smoking tools were probably made from materials that vanished thousands of years ago, which means the first smoker may have lived tens of thousands of years before we found our first piece of evidence. And that changes everything, because the oldest discovery probably isn't the oldest story. The first person to inhale smoke could never have imagined that thousands of generations later, people would still be doing the very same thing. He wasn't thinking about habit. He wasn't thinking about addiction. He was simply sitting beside a fire, trying to stay warm. But sometimes, the greatest changes in history begin in exactly this way, with a single accidental breath. And perhaps, the history of smoking isn't really the history of tobacco. It's the history of human curiosity, the history of exploration, the desire to reach beyond the ordinary world. And while archaeologists continue to make new discoveries, we still don't know where this story truly began. Everything changed with the arrival of modern laboratories. Only a few decades ago, archaeologists could do little more than make educated guesses. They uncovered ancient pipes, ceremonial bowls, fragments of pottery, but they had no way of knowing what had once been burned inside them. Today, that has changed. Modern chemical analysis can detect substances so small they are invisible to the human eye. Inside the tiny pores of stone and clay, microscopic traces of ancient plants can survive for thousands of years. Researchers carefully collect minute samples, place them into highly sensitive instruments, and begin searching for chemical signatures. Every plant leaves behind its own unique fingerprint, a fingerprint that time cannot completely erase. If a plant was burned inside a pipe, even thousands of years later, it may still leave behind invisible evidence. Those tiny traces allow archaeologists to answer questions that once seemed impossible. What people were smoking, where they smoked it, and even when those rituals took place. What once appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary piece of stone suddenly becomes a window into the past. Every ancient pipe becomes a time capsule, preserving a story that has remained hidden for centuries. And this is where the investigation becomes truly fascinating, because when the first laboratory results arrived, they revealed something no one had expected. And what those results reveal changed our understanding of ancient smoking forever. For a long time, many historians believed that smoking began with tobacco. It seemed like the obvious conclusion. After all, tobacco would eventually spread across the world and become one of the most famous plants in human history. But the laboratory evidence told a different story. The oldest pipes didn't all contain the same plant. Instead, researchers discovered traces of different species in different parts of the world. Some contained tobacco, others revealed evidence of cannabis, and in some regions, the remains pointed to local aromatic plants that had been burned during ceremonies and rituals. Suddenly, a much larger picture began to emerge. Ancient people weren't searching for one specific plant. They were searching for the effects that smoke could produce. The plants changed, the cultures changed, the rituals changed, but one idea remained remarkably similar. Smoke was believed to connect people with something beyond everyday life, whether that meant spirits, healing, guidance, or simply a different state of mind. Across continents and across thousands of years, human beings kept returning to the same ritual, different civilizations, different beliefs, but the same rising smoke. And that raised an even bigger question. If smoke had become so important to so many cultures, how did one particular plant eventually come to dominate the entire world? That answer begins on another continent. But as tobacco spread across Europe, its meaning began to change. For indigenous peoples, it had been part of ceremonies, a symbol of tradition, a connection between the physical world and the spiritual one. In Europe, it became something else. At first, many physicians believed tobacco was a miracle plant. It was recommended for headaches, toothaches, even respiratory illnesses. Today, we know those beliefs were wrong. But in the 16th and 17th centuries, medicine was still searching for answers. Tobacco quickly became more than a curiosity. It became a valuable commodity. Ships carried it across oceans. Farmers planted vast new fields. Merchants built fortunes around it. Before long, smoking was no longer limited to rituals or sacred ceremonies. It had entered everyday life. Over the centuries, pipes were joined by cigars. Cigars were followed by cigarettes. Factories replaced handmade tobacco. Mass production replaced tradition, and advertising transformed a centuries-old practice into one of the world's largest industries. The smoke looked the same, but the reason for inhaling it had changed completely. What began as a sacred sacred ritual had become an everyday habit, and that may be the greatest transformation in the entire history of smoking. And yet, after everything we've discovered, one mystery still remains. We know how smoking spread across civilizations. We know how tobacco conquered the world. We know what modern science has revealed. But we still don't know who was the very first person to intentionally inhale smoke. Perhaps it happened around a lonely campfire. Perhaps it was an accident. Or perhaps it happened many different times, in many different places. We may never know, because history doesn't preserve every moment. Some stories disappear forever, but their consequences remain. 300,000 years ago, a human being sat beside a fire, watching the flames, breathing the smoke, without realizing that one simple breath would become part of a story lasting thousands of generations. Today, millions of people still watch smoke rise into the sky. The reasons have changed, the plants have changed, the civilizations have changed, but the act itself remains almost the same. Perhaps the history of smoking has never really been about tobacco, or pipes, or cigarettes. Perhaps it has always been about something much deeper. Human curiosity, the desire to explore, to understand, to experience something beyond the ordinary. And maybe that is why this story is still being written, because somewhere beneath the ground, hidden inside forgotten artifacts, or buried beneath layers of time, there may still be discoveries waiting to change everything we think we know about the first breath of smoke.